This is a story about a man who never chose wrong, he only chose money. And that choice cost him everything else. Ethan Cole grew up in a quiet town where mornings moved slowly and people trusted each other without thinking. His mother believed in honesty and patience. His father worked with his hands and spoke only when words mattered. But Ethan felt different. He felt like the world was moving faster somewhere else. He watched screens filled with bright cities, tall buildings, confident people, and he felt small, not poor, not unlucky, just invisible, and he promised himself that invisibility would never be his future. Money became his symbol of escape, not comfort, not luxury, but proof that he existed, proof that he mattered. At school he learned early how power worked, not through strength, but through exchange. He traded favors, answers, access. He noticed how people leaned closer when they needed something, how respect appeared when value was offered. He liked that feeling, the quiet control, the silent win. He told himself it was cleverness, not greed. When teachers praised honesty, he smiled politely and kept his methods private. By the time he turned 18, the town felt too small to hold his ambition. He left for Harbor City with one suitcase and a rehearsed confidence. The city welcomed him with noise and motion, lights that never slept, streets that never slowed. He rented a narrow room above a diner, the walls thin, the air always smelling of oil and fried food, but he did not mind. He barely slept anyway. His mind stayed busy with plans. He found a job in the mailroom of a brokerage firm, not because he loved finance, but because finance lived close to money, and money lived close to power. He watched the traders through glass walls, sharp voices, quick decisions, casual certainty. They laughed loudly and complained softly. They looked untouchable. Ethan studied them like a language. Their posture, their tone, their timing. He practiced sounding sure even when he was not. A junior broker named Mason Reed noticed him. Mason liked energy and boldness. Mason said the city only rewards those who take risks. Ethan nodded, because risk sounded better than waiting. His parents called often at first, asking if he was eating, if he was sleeping. Ethan answered cheerfully, said everything was fine, said he was building a future. His mother reminded him to stay kind. His father reminded him to stay grounded. Ethan thanked them and ended the calls quickly, because their voices slowed his thoughts. One night after work he stood by his window, city lights reflecting like endless opportunities, and he made a quiet promise to himself. Money would come first, always first, before comfort, before relationships, before doubt. He believed that once money was secured, everything else could be fixed later. He did not know then that later is not a place you arrive at, but a direction you choose, and that night, without realizing it, Ethan chose his direction. The first real shortcut appeared without drama, without warning, just a moment of carelessness that felt like fate. Mason Reed left a client folder open on his desk while arguing on the phone. Names, balances, notes, private fears. Ethan walked past and slowed down. His eyes caught details faster than his conscience could react. He told himself it was curiosity, then opportunity, then necessity. He copied the list and felt a familiar click inside, the same feeling he had known at school when a trade worked. He did not call it stealing, he called it initiative. After hours he began calling the clients, his voice calm, respectful, patient. He listened more than he spoke. He mirrored their concerns, then guided them gently toward his ideas. One of them was Clara Hayes, an older woman with careful savings and a cautious tone. She spoke about safety, stability, not losing what she had built. Ethan answered with soft words. Protected, balanced, limited risk. He did not lie loudly. He shaped the truth quietly. He placed her money into a structure that paid him more than it protected her, and he told himself it was temporary, that success would justify it later. Commissions followed quickly, then praise, then trust. Ethan upgraded his clothes, his watch, his confidence. He learned that appearance accelerates belief. His parents called and asked how work was going. Ethan said he was doing great. Said he was moving up. He avoided details. Details invited questions. Mason introduced him to Jordan Price at a networking event. Jordan did not speak loudly. He did not need to. People leaned toward him naturally. Jordan asked Ethan what he wanted. Ethan answered honestly, money and progress. Jordan smiled slightly and said progress requires courage, and courage requires ignoring comfort. That sentence stayed with Ethan long after the event ended. Jordan invited him to a private dinner a week later. No photos, no jokes, just quiet conversation and sharp focus. Jordan spoke about markets like they were terrain, something to cross, not something to respect. He said some people wait for permission, others create outcomes. Ethan felt chosen, included, lifted out of the crowd. When Jordan asked if he wanted access to better opportunities, Ethan said yes without hesitation. That night he walked home through glowing streets and felt taller, richer already in his mind. He believed he had crossed a line into a new level. He did not notice that the line only went one way, and that each step forward made turning back less likely. Jordan Price introduced Ethan to a different rhythm of life, slower voices, faster consequences, meetings that felt casual but carried weight. Everything happened quietly, without records, without clear boundaries. Ethan learned that influence did not announce itself, it simply moved things. He joined a small circle that spoke in half sentences and shared looks instead of explanations. Deals were framed as opportunities. Risks were softened into technical details. Ethan listened carefully and adapted quickly. He learned which questions were welcome and which ones closed doors. He learned that silence could be a form of loyalty. Jordan trusted him with a small side fund, private, selective, flexible. Ethan liked the word private. It felt powerful. He called clients and offered access, special timing, early positioning. He made urgency sound like insight, and insight sound like certainty. Money flowed in, not loudly, but steadily. His commissions grew, his apartment improved. Higher floor, cleaner view, quieter neighbors. He began to feel above the noise. He dated Lily Grant, a designer who valued calm mornings and honest conversations. She noticed how rarely Ethan relaxed, how often he checked his phone. She asked what he was chasing. Ethan answered, success. Lily asked what success meant. Ethan paused, then said freedom. Lily smiled gently and said freedom from what? Ethan did not like that question. He preferred numbers. Numbers did not ask follow-ups. He bought gifts. Instead, dinners, trips, thoughtful gestures that required no explanation. But Lily watched how he treated people, how his attention vanished during calls, how his energy shifted only around deals. She said, "You are always somewhere else." Ethan replied that focus was necessary, that this was how winning looked. Lily said winning should not feel this lonely. She left quietly, no argument, only distance. Ethan told himself relationships were distractions, that attachments slowed momentum. Jordan approved of that thinking. Jordan said clarity requires sacrifice. Ethan nodded because sacrifice sounded heroic when it was abstract. He began bending rules in small ways, timing adjustments, optimistic assumptions, selective wording, nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, always just enough. He told himself he was still in control, still ethical in his own way. His parents called less often. His friends faded naturally. Ethan did not notice. He was surrounded by screens, by movement, by money. And he mistook motion for progress, not realizing that speed can carry you far from where you intended to go. The side fund expanded quietly, almost politely. It did not announce itself. It simply occupied more of Ethan's time, his thoughts, his priorities. Jordan encouraged discretion. No posts, no noise, only results. Ethan hosted small private gatherings, soft lighting, careful music, conversations that felt important even when they said little. Clients thanked him for access, for attention, for making them feel chosen. Ethan learned how powerful that feeling was, how easily trust followed. Exclusivity. Clara Hayes attended one event and told Ethan she finally felt secure. He smiled and said she was in good hands. Even as he shifted her money again behind the scenes, he told himself he was optimizing. Jordan began to ask for deeper alignment, not just performance, but loyalty. He spoke about smoothing paths and removing obstacles. Ethan understood without needing detail. He began signing documents without slowing down, forwarding messages with intentional gaps, using connections to quiet questions before they formed. Everything stayed calm on the surface, and calm became the goal. Ethan's lifestyle reflected his rise: better furniture, quieter rooms, fewer roommates. He liked control, he liked choosing silence. His mother visited Harbor City and marveled at the buildings. She held his arm like the city might swallow her. She asked to see where he worked. Ethan took her to the lobby: polished floors, glowing screens, Polite guards, he did not take her upstairs, not because it was forbidden, but because it was true. He hugged her and accepted her pride, but the warmth faded quickly, replaced by discomfort, because he knew she believed in a version of him that no longer existed. After she left, he stared at his reflection in the elevator glass and felt unfamiliar, too composed, too distant. He called Jordan and asked for something bigger, something definitive. Jordan paused longer than usual, then said there was a project called Orchard, complex, heavy, transformative. Ethan said he was ready. Jordan replied that readiness has a price. Ethan said he could afford it, and when the Orchard file arrived, sealed and thick, Ethan felt a quiet thrill, not excitement, but commitment, the kind that closes doors behind you without making a sound. Orchard was not glamorous. It was a manufacturing company in the Midwest. Old buildings, steady workers, modest profits, the kind of place that survived on routine rather than ambition. Jordan described it as undervalued, tired, inefficient, full of hidden potential. Ethan liked those words. They suggested control. The plan was framed as optimization, acquire influence, reshape decisions, reduce weight, then exit cleanly. Ethan presented Orchard to investors with calm confidence. He spoke about unlocking value and modernizing structure. His voice stayed smooth, his slides stayed clean. Money came in quickly, because certainty sells. Ethan visited the factory once with Jordan. The air smelled of metal and oil. Machines moved with patient rhythm. Workers nodded politely. A manager named Frank Dalton shook Ethan's hand and spoke about community, about families, about stability. Ethan listened and smiled. Then asked about asset sales, outsourcing, benefit adjustments. Frank's expression tightened, but he remained respectful. He said those changes would hurt people. Ethan replied with professional phrases: short-term pressure, long-term health, necessary alignment. He left the factory feeling justified. The numbers improved at first. The market responded. Ethan's reputation grew. Invitations increased. He began to enjoy how people watched his reactions, how silence from him created tension. Clara Hayes called to ask about a small change in her statement, a new fee, a minor dip. Ethan explained patiently, reassured her, told her it was normal. She trusted him, and trust felt like leverage, not responsibility. Jordan pushed for faster results, deeper cuts. Ethan hesitated briefly, then agreed, because Orchard was their ladder upward, and ladders are not built to stand still. The local town began to feel strain, but Ethan stayed distant. Spreadsheets replaced faces, margins replaced stories. He told himself that outcomes mattered more than feelings, and that efficiency was a neutral word, even when it carried weight. The early gains at Orchard did not last as long as the presentations promised. The first issues appeared quietly: delayed shipments, small quality complaints, confused schedules. Nothing dramatic, nothing headline-worthy, but enough to slow momentum. Jordan dismissed it as adjustment noise. Ethan agreed, because agreement was easier than doubt. The second quarter revealed deeper cracks. Outsourced teams misunderstood processes. Experienced workers left. Training lagged. Customer confidence softened. Numbers stopped climbing and began to wobble. Jordan's tone shifted, still calm, but sharper at the edges. He said the story needed reinforcement. The market needed reassurance. Ethan understood what that meant. Reports became more optimistic. Assumptions stretched. Timing adjusted. Everything remained technically explainable, but less honest than before. Ethan told himself it was temporary, a bridge to stability. Frank Dalton called directly, his voice tight but controlled. He said morale was collapsing, skilled workers were leaving, safety concerns were rising. Ethan listened without interrupting, then replied with careful language. He said leadership was monitoring the situation, that improvements were coming. Frank said people cannot live on promises. Ethan ended the call and felt irritation, not guilt, irritation at resistance. Jordan introduced Ava Sinclair, a legal strategist with precise speech and steady eyes. Ava spoke in terms of insulation, separation, and exposure. She explained how to reduce personal risk, how to create layers between decisions and responsibility. Ethan listened closely. He did not like feeling vulnerable, and Ava's methods offered armor. Structures were adjusted, roles clarified on paper, accountability diffused. Everything looked organized, professional, safe. Clara Hayes called again. worry clearer in her voice now. She mentioned articles about hidden fees and market instability. She asked if she should exit. Ethan felt a spike of urgency. Withdrawals would signal weakness. He spoke gently, used her name often, slowed his voice, explained volatility as opportunity, suggested patience. Clara agreed reluctantly, trust holding just long enough. Ethan hung up and stared at the screen, his reflection faint in the dark glass. He noticed his hands were shaking, just slightly. He blamed coffee. The media attention around Orchard increased. Local stories about layoffs, about broken expectations. Ethan dismissed them. Publicly, privately he worked longer hours, sleeping less. His body began to resist the pace. Headaches, shallow rest, constant tension. Jordan pushed for faster cuts, quicker moves. Ethan complied, because slowing down felt dangerous, and because turning back now would mean admitting the latter was leaning against the wrong wall, something he was not yet ready to face. The first official inquiry arrived without drama, a formal email written in neutral language, requesting clarification on reporting methods, timelines, and decision processes. Ethan read it twice and felt his chest tighten, not from fear of loss, but from fear of exposure. Jordan called within minutes, his voice steady, controlled. He said this was routine, that attention followed success. Ava Sinclair joined the call and outlined a response plan. Answer only what is asked, provide nothing extra, maintain consistency. Ethan followed instructions, but something had shifted inside him. The work no longer felt like progress, it felt like containment. Days filled with document reviews, language adjustments, internal calls that went in circles. Ethan found older messages that sounded too confident, too casual. He deleted what he could, archived the rest, telling himself he was protecting the firm. Protecting investors, protecting stability. Clara Hayes left a voicemail, her voice tired and uncertain. She explained she needed access to part of her savings for a medical expense. Ethan closed his eyes and calculated. Withdrawals would trigger alerts, patterns, questions. He called her back and suggested waiting, offered a small personal loan instead to avoid disrupting her position. Clara hesitated, then thanked him, relief mixed with gratitude. Ethan ended the call feeling hollow. Because he had used kindness as leverage, and leverage as control. Orchard's situation worsened. A regional paper published an interview with former employees. Morale damage became public. Investors asked sharper questions. Jordan demanded reassurance. Ethan worked nights preparing explanations. His voice remained calm, but his body did not listen anymore. Sleep came in fragments. His heart raced without reason. Coffee replaced meals. Ava warned him to reduce his public presence, to stop posting success imagery. Ethan complied, and the silence around him grew. Friends stopped calling, contacts became cautious, conversations shortened. He did not notice at first, focused on maintaining structure, but structure does not replace support. Lily Grant appeared briefly in his thoughts, her simple questions, her calm certainty. He considered calling her, not to reconnect, just to hear something real. But he stopped himself, because he no longer knew how to speak without strategy. The inquiry expanded. More requests, more oversight, more careful faces on video calls. Ethan began to feel like a problem being managed rather than a contributor being valued, and for the first time since arriving in Harbor City, money no longer felt like control. It felt like weight, pressing down, demanding silence, demanding obedience, demanding more than it gave back. The investigation widened slowly, not with accusations, but with process. More meetings appeared on Ethan's calendar, more careful phrasing, more pauses before answers. The tone shifted from curiosity to verification. Ethan sat in glass conference rooms and felt exposed despite the polished walls. Jordan tried to maintain authority, offering explanations shaped by market language, blaming timing, external pressure, unpredictable conditions. Ava Sinclair remained precise, reminding Ethan to stay consistent, to never improvise, to let silence work. But silence began to feel like isolation. Banks adjusted terms quietly, credit lines tightened, partners requested distance without confrontation. Ethan watched access disappear one step at a time, not dramatically, just efficiently. The firm suggested he take a temporary leave to reduce noise. The word temporary sounded thin. Ethan felt anger rise. Because he had delivered growth when it was celebrated, risk when it was profitable, and now. The distance felt transactional. Jordan remained composed, almost detached. When Ethan confronted him, Jordan said responsibility follows position, and position changes. Ethan realized then that loyalty in their world was conditional, not personal. Clara Hayes finally withdrew a large portion of her funds, not out of confidence, but necessity. The withdrawal triggered others. The side fund began to drain steadily. Ethan spent days on calls offering reassurance that sounded less convincing each time. At night he stared at ceilings instead of numbers. Sleep refused to settle. He tried to call his parents but stopped before dialing. He did not know how to explain a life built on momentum now slowing to a crawl. He drove to his hometown unexpectedly, parked near his childhood house, watched the porch light glow. Memories surfaced uninvited. His father's steady hands, his mother's patient voice. He did not go inside. Shame held him in place. He returned to Harbor City and noticed the city felt colder, less impressed, like it had never promised him anything. The towers reflected him back as a smaller figure than he remembered. The inquiry continued, and Ethan understood that money could delay consequences, but it could not cancel them, and for the first time he considered that choosing money first had not made him strong, it had made him alone. The collapse did not arrive in a single moment. It unfolded in layers. Quiet decisions, formal notices, polite conversations that closed doors. The firm made Ethan's leave permanent, citing reputation management and strategic distance. Partners stopped responding, invitations disappeared. Jordan Price became unreachable, not because he vanished, but because distance had become useful. Ava Sinclair sent one final message advising restraint and cooperation. The tone was professional, final. Ethan understood he was no longer an asset. He sold personal items not out of desperation, but out of instinct. The flow had reversed. Money was leaving, clarity was not arriving. Client complaints formalized, reviews were conducted, interviews scheduled. Ethan sat across from people who once praised his confidence, and now searched his face for sincerity. Clara Hayes met him in a small office. Papers trembling slightly in her hands, she spoke softly, said she trusted him. Said trust should have meant protection. Ethan attempted explanations, market shifts, complexity, unforeseen pressure, but the words felt thin even as he spoke them. Clara replied calmly that intention does not restore stability. That sentence stayed with him long after the meeting ended. Ethan returned to his apartment, and realized there was no one he could call without calculation. Relationships built as transactions had expired. He walked through the city anonymously, hearing laughter that felt distant, observing ordinary moments he no longer knew how to enter. He searched for Mason Reed and learned Mason had reset his life quietly years earlier. A new role, a new path. Ethan felt a sharp envy, not for money, but for escape. His name began appearing in reports and discussions, not as a headline, but as a caution. He adjusted his routine, avoided attention. Caps replaced confidence. Harbor City no longer felt like a stage. It felt like surveillance, and in the quiet between consequences Ethan realized that money had not protected him from loss. It had only delayed the moment when he had to face who he had become without it. Months later Ethan's life had narrowed in ways he never planned for, not only in spending or space, but in rhythm and meaning. The urgency that once drove him was gone, replaced by long quiet mornings and evenings without calls. At first the silence felt like punishment, then it became a mirror. He took a modest position at a logistics firm far from finance. The work was structured, rule-based, unglamorous. His manager cared about accuracy and consistency, not ambition or past stories. Ethan learned how heavy simple honesty could feel when you are not hiding behind momentum. He stood in lines, followed procedures, waited his turn, and slowly noticed that ordinary life carried its own dignity, something he had dismissed as weakness before. He moved to a smaller apartment, sold what no longer felt like him, and began rebuilding his days around routine instead of urgency. He visited his parents for the first time since everything unraveled. The house looked the same, unchanged by markets or failure. His mother opened the door and hugged him without questions. Her warmth struck him harder than any accusation. His father listened at the kitchen table as Ethan spoke carefully about choices, not every detail, but the pattern. money first, people later, shortcuts that felt harmless until they were not. His father did not raise his voice. He said quietly that every decision has a cost. And that ignoring the cost does not erase it, it only postpones payment. Ethan sat with that truth and felt it settle fully for the first time. He began writing letters to former clients, not explanations, not defenses, but acknowledgments. Some letters were never answered, some replies were brief, but the act itself mattered because responsibility without applause was something he had never practiced. He repaid what he could over time, slowly, without announcements, without strategy. Clara Hayes responded once with a short message saying she hoped he had learned, and that learning mattered more than regret. Ethan kept that message folded in a drawer as a reminder, not of guilt, but of obligation. He stopped chasing shortcuts, stopped looking for leverage in every interaction. He learned that trust is not built through persuasion, but through repetition, showing up, doing the right thing when nothing is gained. Evenings became quieter, sometimes lonely, but honest. One night he walked by the lake near his hometown, the water dark and still, reflecting small lights from distant houses. He thought about the man he believed he needed to become, untouchable, fast, admired, and about the man he had actually become, efficient, empty, alone. He realized that money itself had never been the enemy. The enemy was choosing it as the only measure of worth, because anything measured alone grows distorted. Standing there he understood the final truth clearly. He had chosen money at any cost, and when the cost revealed itself, it had taken everything that made the money meaningful: relationships, peace, identity, the ability to rest. He could not undo the past, but he could choose differently going forward, not dramatically, not publicly, just consistently. And for the first time since leaving that small town, Ethan felt something unfamiliar and steady, not ambition, not hunger, but balance, and he accepted that rebuilding would be slow, imperfect, and real, and that this time the price he paid would be worth it.